Hello guys, and welcome back to Joe's Ventures. And today we're going to be doing part 37 of our Planet Zoo mod spotlights. We take a look at a bunch of cool animals that modders have been making and just take a look and learn about the wonderful world we live in. I really like that sentiment, so we're going to be starting today. We've got like the last subspecies. I know we've done the other two subspecies of the black and white ruffed lemur. We've got the last subspecies that was missed out. So this is the white-belted ruffed lemur. White-belted black and white ruffed lemur. So that's the full name. This was made by Leaf, who made the other two. And I really like this guy. So the main difference that you can see, obviously, between the other two subspecies is it's got this white belt. It looks like it's got this white band on its back. So white belt. Pretty fitting name, I think. And what's pretty interesting is that these guys are also the most sort of northern subspecies. So these are found furthest to the north, with the southern black and white ruffed lemur found further to the south. So the southern one, that's just we covered last time, that's found a lot more south. And the black and white ruffed lemur, like the dominant subspecies, is found in between. So that kind of tells you how the distribution goes. So these guys are the largest extant member of the family Lemuridae that can range from 100 to 120 centimeters long, or 3.3 to 3.9 feet, and weigh between 3.1 and 4.1 kilos. And you can see they've got this general black and white pattern. Varies with the subspecies, as I just explained. So just to go over quickly the information I've already mentioned a few times, this is mainly, they usually have a very highly frugivorous diet, or frugivores, I think that's how you pronounce it, frugivores. So they will eat a lot of fruit and all that, and nectar, seeds, fungi even make up a small part of their diet, but mainly they will eat only fruits. And I have to say they are very, very cute. If you won't agree, we'll have a look at the babies while we're talking about the babies. It's got a bit of a white red patch going, but aren't you adorbs? I think you're very, very cute. So they have a female dominance hierarchy, really. So they just demonstrate this rare. So the females are kind of the boss within feeding and leading the group, and the males are subservient, which is very interesting. And they have all sorts of different communications that are similar to, calls similar to other lemurs that they can use a sort of variety. So one could be like a loud roar, can be lots of different like chirps and things. So yeah, they do have all sorts of different calling behaviors and things, not too different from the other subspecies, of course. And with reproduction, these guys sexually mature at about 3 to 5 years of age, or 1.5 to 3 years of age, I mean. I'll talk to you while looking at you. Wonderful. So, although breeding is not necessarily through that first year to maturity, they may breed at like 2 to 4 years old. That's probably about average. So the female will come into estrus at about over the course of several days, and usually they will breed in the warmer months, and there's even a smaller window for that. Then they usually have build a nest where they have the infants, and they usually give birth between 2 to 6 offspring that are unable to cling to their mother as in other primates, so they kind of stay in that nest, and they will stay with the infants. The female will stay with the infants for about all day, so nearly 24 hours. And both the males and females will guard the nest, and there is also evidence that unrelated females will deposit their babies in a communal nest and share the parental care with the other individuals that forage. So that means all the infants have a higher chance of survival, and no one lemur is kind of stuck with all the babies. So they take turns and just take responsibility, which is pretty cool. And very, very sadly, these are critically endangered, and their population has been estimated to take a very, very steep downturn, dropping 80% in the 21 years before 2020, so that's very worrying. So about 3 generations, and they found that mainly this is because of bushmeat, but also habitat degradation because of agriculture, which obviously does suck. But there have been efforts to try and reintroduce individuals, so there is conservation programs trying to bring these guys back up, so hopefully that turns around. Madagascar has a big issue with that, but I think they're still wonderful how they are. Really wonderful creatures. So again, done by Leaf, and now we're going to move on to another bird by Ron or Rihanna. We know her, famous sushi birds, famous for her birds. So now we've got the oscillated turkey. So this is one I've been excited for a while. So this is not too different from your wild turkey, but the main difference is that these guys are obviously a lot more iridescent and a lot more bright, and they are found in the Yucatan Peninsula of Mexico, as well as parts of Guatemala and Belize. They're much smaller than their North American wild turkey relatives, but they are still pretty large. They get to about 70 to 122 centimeters, or 28 to 48 inches in length, and average about 3 kilos for the females and 5 kilos for the males. So that's 6 to 11 pounds. That's the variation. So they only live in a 50,000 square mile range in the Yucatan Peninsula of Mexico, which includes all these different ranges and stuff. And you can see the main difference is the feathers. You see this really cool green and blue iridescent color. Also, they have like this quite bluish head, unlike the reddish that you see in the wild turkeys, which is pretty cool. And both sexes will have blue heads with some orange and red nodules that you can see hanging off here. And the males have this fleshy blue crown that looks really nice. And the males also have spurs, so they have deep red legs that you can see here, and they have spurs. They may have put them on, and this is a female. Yeah, but they have these spurs similar to the North American turkey, but they are much longer and thinner, and they can get up to over 6 centimeters, but they average at about 4 centimeters, or about 1 inches, about 2.4 inches. And yeah, really cool. So these guys, like other turkeys, they all spend most of their time on the ground foraging, and they often prefer to run to escape danger rather than fly, but though they can fly short distances. And they roost usually high in the trees to get away from predators like jaguars, and usually live in family groups. So they are pretty generalist in their feeding habits. They'll feed a lot of different things, especially forage, but they'll also eat beetles, moths, ants, nuts and leaves, pretty much just whatever they can get their beak around. And the breeding season for these guys begins in early February, where you first hear them gobble, 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 gobble. And the breeding season will peak in March and come to an end about April. And the male oscillated turkeys, what they'll do is they have an elaborate spirited display to attract the females, and they'll use their tail fans just like the North American turkeys do. But there's several different differences, like the males will tap their feet and do all sorts of different things. And of course they have all these different vocalizations that usually last about 2 to 25 minutes before sunrise that are similar to wild turkeys, but generally also when babies are born, they usually hatch in May after a 28 days incubation period for the babies, and they are covered in this reddish brown. Let's see if we can find it. There's the babies. The babies are here. So you can see they're kind of covered in this reddish brown colors, and which helps them to be able to hide from predators since they are camouflaged. And they are born what is called precocial, so that means pretty much right out the gate they're ready to go. So they are able to jump out of the nest and go find their own food, and then they follow their mother until they reach adulthood, and then where they begin to range, often regrouping at the roost. So they'll just kind of do their thing until they grow up, and they are very, very cute. Wouldn't you agree? And luckily, they are considered near threatened as of 2009, and have been extirpated from a large part of their range, and because of land use and hunting, unsustainable harvesting. But it seems to be turning around, so they're at risk because of these factors, but they are still quite common, so that's a good thing. They just have a little bit of a restricted range, but still really, really wonderful animals. Again, done by Rihanna or Ron. And now we got to move on. We done a mammal, then a bird. Now we've got a fish. We got two fishes, actually, and they're both stingrays. So let's see what they're up to. Look at them everywhere. So we have got this little guy here. Let's have a look at you. So this is by Leaf and was ported from Endless Ocean 2. This is the Xingzhou river ray, or the White-Blotched river stingray, or the polka dot stingray. Those are all its names. They are a species of freshwater stingray, as you can see here, and they are endemic to the Xingzhou River basin in Brazil and prefer these rocky bottoms of rivers and stuff. And they are sometimes kept in aquaria. They actually are a venomous stingray, and they contain venom like other stingrays, and like a little barb at the end of their tails. They have like this dentin spine that they use. And while it does not change composition as they grow up, the toxicity of ray venom actually decreases as they grow older. So the older you get, the less toxic it gets. So if you want to get stung by a stingray, which I definitely do not recommend, hope it's an old stingray because you'll have a more chance of not dying. But on the other hand, a lot of things that help with them survival is the jaw shape and the stiffness, and mineralization is also strengthened with age, so that allows mature rays to eat harder shelled invertebrates as opposed to younger ones that need to eat softer food. And these changes in traits with maturation or growing older shows that the different pressures that they experience in terms of their feeding ecology and functions as they avoid predation and competing with other animals during their ontogeny, or how they grow. So that's really cool. And they are pretty big. They reach up to 40 centimeters in disc width, 75 centimeters in total length, and about 20 kilos in weight. So about 16 inches, 30 inches, and 44 pounds. And the females will grow larger than the males, and they are closely related to a few other different species, but you can tell them apart because they're quite a bit lighter, and they have underparts that are mostly dullish black and things like that. A really wonderful little species. And they're considered data deficient because often data deficient just means we don't have enough understanding of their population dynamics to really make a good judgment of their commonness or if they're rare or whatever. So yeah, still a really cool little guy here. Love seeing stingrays. It's actually based on the pygmy hippo, so that's why they can walk along the bottom like that, and I think that's super cool. So yeah, we're going to move it on to another stingray. So this one's a little bit more well known. So this one was also done by Leaf, and he ported it from Endless Ocean 2, so that's Archaea, I think that's the company. So we got this cool little man here. So this is the blue-spotted ribbon ray. So these guys are a species of stingray that are found in intertidal zones about 30 meters deep, or about 100 feet, and are commonly found through the tropical Indian and Western Pacific Oceans, in coral reefs and nearshore habitats. They're not a very big ray. They do not really extend 35 centimeters or 14 inches in disc width, and they have these mostly smooth oval pectoral fin discs that you see here, and along with these large protruding eyes that give them a bit of character. And they have a relatively short tail that's also pretty thick as well, and is obviously pretty identifiable from other species of rays because they have these big blue spots that you can see here. So these guys, at night, they'll often hang out in small groups, and they will follow the rising tide onto sandy flats and root around for small invertebrates and bony fish that are living in the sediments. And when the tide recedes, they'll separate from these groups that they make, and they'll find shelter in the reef. And what's really interesting about these guys, they're also aplacental viviparous. So what they'll do is the females will give birth to a litter of up to 7 young, and they don't have a placenta, they just live off the yolk. And they're capable of injuring humans, like the other stingray species, with pretty powerful venom. So you got to be careful. Let's see if there's one hanging out in the water. That's what I'm going to do right now. There's one. Look at them hanging out there. So even though they do that, they like to run away if threatened, and they are popular with aquarists, sadly, but despite being poorly suited for captivity. So as I mentioned, they're found pretty much everywhere on the Western Pacific and the Indo-Pacific regions where they're mainly found. Pretty much covered that. And while they're usually timid towards humans, they are capable of obviously infecting people, or not infecting, but envenomating people. And they are pretty attractive, and being small, they are common in the pet trade. But they seldom fare well with other hobbyists because they seem to refuse to eat and they just stop eating and die. But they are managed in large aquariums. And the big issue for these guys in terms of conservation is often that they can get caught accidentally in long lines, spears, gill nets, and things like that. So it's very easy for them to get caught in these things. I know you're running around on land, but I think they're very funny. But luckily these guys are considered least concerned with the IUCN, so there's plenty of populations. Even though they're pretty common and widely distributed, they do face a lot of the issues that a lot of the coral species, such as the degradation of coral reefs, and also there's been some pretty destructive fishing practices where they throw cyanide or dynamite into the water. And they have another issue as well, is that they're collected a lot for the pet trade, which is also bad, and they also have been under heavy pressure because they're getting fished even though they're not a target fish. So that could be a big issue for these guys, but they're still wonderful how they are. And as they're 8% viviparous, so that means they get the yolk. And they also are supported by this uterine milk, also called mucus fat, and the proteins. And the gestation period is estimated to be about 4 to 12 months. And the females will bear as much as 7 young. They usually weigh length about 13 to 14 centimeters across. And they reach sexual maturity to about 20 to 21 centimeters, or 7.9 to 8.3 inches. So yeah, pretty cool animal. I like these little mens right here. So now we're going to be moving on to another mammal. So this was made by Seth. This is a subspecies. We have got the African forest buffalo. So really wonderful guy here. So also known as the Congo buffalo or the dwarf buffalo, they are the smallest subspecies or sometimes species of the African Cape buffalo, the Cape buffalo or the African buffalo. So these guys are pretty small. They usually get between 425 to 870 kilograms. That's for a Cape buffalo, but the African forest buffalo are much lighter. They get between 250 and 320 kilograms, or 550 to 705 pounds, partly because they live in a forest, so it's easier for them to get smaller to fit through the narrower spaces. And weight is not the only differentiation. You can see that these guys have a reddish-brown hide that is also quite dark in the face, and they also have these really hairy ears that you can't really notice on this at the moment, but you can see if you look up pictures of them, they have much hairier ears, which is really cool. So they live in the forests of West and Central Africa, so they live mainly in the Congo, but their habitat is a little bit more generalist than that. They can live in marshes, grassy savannas, and wet African rainforests. Savannas are where they graze, and they usually wallow in the marshes and stuff to help protect them from insects. But they have a really important thing for their survival is this mixture habitats. They issue with encroachment from people and stuff that really hurts these complex environments that they require on to survive, since they like to hang out with wallows and also graze in the savannas and things like that. They like these wet savannas and stuff. It's still really cool. But large home ranges there's a correlation. You can see that these guys, usually when there's a large range, they usually live in least productive habitats. You can tell it can be a good or bad thing. So if you know that they're all having big ranges, there might be an issue in the habitat and it's not being as productive as it can be. But sometimes it's just luck of the draw, really. But they arrange themselves in herds similar to Cape buffalo, where they defend themselves from predators, even though they're not immune from that. African leopards have been known to be a threat to young buffalo and will feast on them, and Nile crocodiles have been known to eat adults. So let's find us a male here. Here's a male. Wonderful guy here. So these guys are pretty social, but they're not quite as gregarious as the Cape buffalo, with Cape buffalo living in herds that have been known to be over 1,000 members. African forest buffalo live in much smaller groups, as small as 3 and really over 30. And if African forest buffaloes are found in a large group, they spend most of the time grazing, since they have less time devoted to avoidance behavior. And now we'll talk about the baby. Let's have a look at the baby. Look at you, very cute. So these herds usually consist of 1 or 2 bulls with a harem of adult females along with their juvenile and young calves. And unlike these guys, these bulls will remain with the herd constantly year round. And on the other hand, Cape buffalo stay with the bachelor herds until the wet season, when young bulls join the females and mate to help protect the young calves and then leave. So the males will stay all the time. The Cape buffaloes kind of hit it and quit it, as you can say. So they usually remain in the same herd for their entire lives, but there have been herd switching events as observed, which is not really a common occurrence. But herds will often split into 2 groups for a short period and then merge back together. But luckily these guys are relatively unaffected by seasonal cycles, because usually it's just wet and dry season. However, in the wet season the herds are more spread out in the forest, and the animals tend to use resting places based on sand in the wet season, but use dirt and leaves in the wet dry season. so they just want to make sure they stay dry. And more so, the open habitats such as clearings, they can become more aggravated when resting, and a more rounded shape with the herds of forest habitats during wet season. So as the open habitats, they kind of get more agitated because they're more open to obviously getting attacked. So they're very careful. Still really, really wonderful guys. I love myself some forest buffaloes. So these guys were made by Seth, and I know there's like 2 other people that have been making forest buffaloes. So we're obviously going to have to be covering those. Really, really wonderful mod. Cool guy. I like Seth. And now we've got a new modder on the scene. This is Diddums and was imported by Genora Pizza. We've got a really cute little guy here, one of my favorites. It's a little bulky seal. So these guys are the world's only subspecies of freshwater seal, and they're an airless seal endemic to Lake Balkai, I believe we should pronounce it, in Siberia. And they are the smallest true seal and the only exclusively freshwater pinniped. So these guys are doing pretty well. There's a population of about 80,000 to 100,000, which equates to the carrying capacity of the lake, and they are considered least concerned, so that's very, very good. So as I mentioned, they're one of the smallest true seals. Adults typically grow from 1:1 to 1.4 meters, or 3'7" to 4'7", and weigh between 63 to 70 kilograms, 139 to 154 pounds. The maximum size these guys have been recorded at is 1.35 meters, or 5'5", and 130 kilograms in weight, but they're kind of the biggest. And they usually get their fattest around spring and highest weight. Lowest weight in the spring and highest weight in the winter, which can actually be huge. It's like a 42% drop sometimes. And they actually unlike a lot of animals, they show like a very, very little amount of sexual dimorphism. So the males are only just slightly larger than the females. See if there's any swimming. They're all hanging out on the beach at the moment. Let's have a look at you while you're being funny. Look at you, buddy. So they have this really cool uniform steely grey coat that you see here, and when the pups are born, they usually weigh about 3 to 3.5 kilograms, or 6.6 to 7.7 pounds. Have a look while we're talking to you. How cute. And they're about 70 centimeters long, or 2 feet 4 inches. So I have to mention, these guys are only found in the Lake Balkai. So that's the only freshwater lake that you can find them. And it's believed that they got there because it was linked to water at some point, and they're also possibly glacial lakes they managed to get into from a previous ice age. And the seals have been estimated to inhabit the lake for over 2 million years, or about 2 million years. And the area of the lake which they reside in can change during the seasons and other environmental factors. They usually spend their time, in the majority of the year, living kilometers away from the bulky seals, so they're solitary from other seals. But in general, the high concentration can be found in northern parts of the lake because the long winter keeps the ice frozen longer, which is good for pupping. However, in recent years, because of climate change, they migrate to the southern half of the lake to avoid hunters. And in winter, the lake is frozen over, so they maintain some breeding holes, and they tend to remain nearby and not interfering with the food supply of nearby seals. So these guys, as I mentioned, these concerns are not currently endangered. There's populations of like 100,000 or 80,000 or 100,000, so that's pretty good. Though there have been some quotas on hunting them, so you're only allowed to kill like only a few thousand. Really, it's just trying to maintain the populations. But there's some other issues that there's been a lot of introduction of pollutants such as pesticides, such as DDT, have been affecting obviously populations of animals around there. Also, they're also susceptible to illnesses and diseases such as canine distemper and the plague, which is also very bad. And it seems to have been resulted in like the death of 6,500 different seals between 1987 and 1988. So quite a big amount. But luckily, they have kind of developed an immunity to them. Though the most serious threat to these guys is global warming, which has affected their cold water environment that they like. And since they can't move anywhere else, if it becomes uninhabitable, they will become extinct. So also these guys reach sexual maturity at about 3 to 6 years of age, while the males will reach it at about 4 to 7, and the males and females are not strongly sexually dimorphic. So they will mate in the water towards the end of the pupping season with a combination of delayed implantation and a 9-month gestation period. They have a pregnancy of about 11 months. The pregnant females are the only seals to haul out during winter, and the males tend to stay in the water under the ice, where the females will give birth to 1 pup, or sometimes 2. And very rarely triplets or quadruplets have been reported, so that could be a bit dangerous. So these guys are slightly polygamous and territorial, so that means they're not particularly defensive of a territory, but they will maintain them. We'll have a look while we're talking about them. I like these little bulky seals, they are so awesome. So they will maintain these large dens and also these breeding holes where they can find and breathe and hide and get warm during the winter. And the females will wean them about 2 and 2.5 months, and occasionally up to 3.5 months. Usually that's when they wean them. And during this time they will feed on their own food, and while they're weaned they can increase their weight 5-fold until their mother introduces them to solid food, be that arthropods, fish, and other foods in the den. And every year during the late winter and spring, both sexes will haul themselves off to molt and will replace their fur. And these guys have been found to be in groups up to 500, and also have been recorded to live for over 50 years, which is pretty extraordinary for a seal, although the females are assumed to be only fertile up to 30. So another weird thing about these guys as well is there's a lot of convergent evolution going on with these guys. If you look at their teeth, they're very similar to crab-eating seals, which feed almost exclusively on krill. These guys feed on the only freshwater copepods, really. That's what they mainly feed on. But they've also been seen to feed on like other species of fish and things that you can find, and they're not very deep divers. They're only really found dive to depths of about 10 to 25 meters deep, but they sometimes can dive up to 400 meters and more than 40 minutes, though they generally don't dive that much. And according to a 2004 paper, during the summer nights, these seals are known to have different foraging strategies during the night and the day. And during the day, these seals will use visual cues to find prey, which is mainly fish, but during the night, they'll use tactile cues to hunt crustaceans, so that's pretty cool. So a really interesting animal. You can see how they've evolved to live in their little freshwater habitat, but sadly that is at risk because of climate change. But still, a really wonderful little seal, very, very cute. Did a good job, Diddums, and thank you, Genora, for porting it. So now we're going to move on to another Genora thing. So these next two have been ported from Maneater. So, that game with the big, when we were playing as a shark. So this comes from Tripwire Entertainment, who made that game, but was ported by Genora Pizza. So we're going to have a look at these wonderful guys here. So this is the Great Hammerhead. So this is the largest species of hammerhead, and they can achieve a length of average about 4.6 meters or about 15 feet, but their maximum length is about 6.1 meters or 20 feet. They've been found in tropical and warm temperate waters across the world, and especially around the continental shelf and coastal areas. So you can see they get this really cool name from the hammerhead, from obviously the hammer-like head. It's called cephalofoil, which they can almost straighten out. It looks almost straight, but they use it to try and add more sensory pits to kind of detect the movements of other animals, so that's pretty cool. And they are very solitary apex predator. They feed on a wide variety of prey, especially like smaller sharks, crustaceans, cephalopods, bony fish. And they've actually used their cephalofoil to immobilize stingray, which is a favorite prey for them, so that's pretty cool. So, as I mentioned here, found pretty much across temperate waters across the world, continental shelf as well, and get pretty big. So they also feed on things like bony fish, tarpans, toadfish, gropers, smooth hounds, pretty much whatever they can. There's also some evidence that these guys may have once preyed on juvenile megalodon, so that's another pretty cool thing. So with evidence from their teeth, these guys ate baby megalodons when they were still around. So awesome. And these guys are viviparous. That means they will, once they're developing young, will develop in the body. So they have this yolk sac that they will So once they've developed, they used up their supply of yolk, kind of what the yolk sac will turn into is sort of like a placenta, which will, obviously the mother will feed them. And the gestation period is usually about 11 months, and they usually give birth to about 6 pups to 55 pups, with 20 to 40 being typical, with a gestation period of 11 months, and they measure about 50 to 70 centimeters, or 19.5 to 27.5 inches. But they will only give birth they only breed every 2 years, giving birth around late spring to summer in the Northern Hemisphere and December to January in Australian waters. So, males reach maturity at about 2.3 to 2.8 meters, or 7 to 9 feet, and about 51 kilograms, or 112 pounds. And the females will reach sexual maturity at about 3 meters, or 9 feet, and 41 kilos. And the young will differ because they usually have a more fronted, rounded head. And their typical lifespan is about 20 to 30 years, although the record has been a female that lived for 50 years. So that's pretty cool. But sadly, these guys are considered critically endangered, and that's because of overfishing and because they're very slow breeders. Since a female only breed every 2 years, that can be a big issue, and their long generation times. Because of hunting for shark fin soup, also getting caught in bycatch, also some pollution and risk of their habitat. It's a very big issue for these guys. But there has been not really any specific conservation measures protecting these guys, but general shark fin bans are pretty good. And one confusing thing about critically endangered is that critically endangered can mean animals that are still relatively common, but they just there's a very sharp decline, or there's an issue that can be really addressing. If they don't address it, they can become extinct. So there's still a lot of great hammerheads around, luckily, but it's just there have been a sharp decline because of the shark fin and also being slow breeders. But they are considered a high-risk species because of that. And all of these sharks are very important for maintaining ecosystems because they are the top predators. They usually eat the animals that are under them in the food chain. Can also be food for whales and larger sharks as well. So it's very important that these guys are protected. Really nice mod as well. I love man-eater models. They're pretty realistic. Fits perfectly in Planet 2. And we'll have a look at a baby while we're here. Let's have a look at the baby. Look at the little man. Little man. I love little mans. Okay, little man's very cute. So now we can move on to another shark. So another port from Genora Pizza and Tripwire Entertainment. We've got the smooth Shortfin Mako, or the Shortfin Mako shark. Also just referred as a blue pointer or a Mako shark. So their name comes from the Mako, which comes from Māori languages, but also has been mixed with common words from other Polynesian languages, such as Samoan and Tahitian and Hawaiian, things like that. So these guys are a fairly large shark. They grow somewhat accelerated compared to other laminid sharks. Oh, are you going to stop there, or are you going to find one swimming around? I think they're going to have a feed. Is there any in the water? There we are. We'll have a look at you. Really wonderful animal. So, an average adult specimen usually reaches between 3.2 meters, or 10 feet, and weigh between 60 and 135 kilograms, or 132 to 298 pounds. And you can see this species is very sexually dimorphic, with females typically being larger than the males. And large specimens have been known, and a few large mature females have been spotted at about 12 feet long, or 3.8 meters, and weigh about 570 kilograms. The largest one found was about 600 kilograms, and the longest verified one was 4.45 meters, or 14.6 feet. That was caught off the Mediterranean coast of France. And there has been obviously reports of ones getting 6 meters and over 1,000 kilograms, but there's not very much hard solid data on that. And these guys are found pretty much all over the world in temperate and tropical waters, and they have been found, they're closely related to the longfin mako that's found in the Gulf Stream and offshore waters such as New Zealand and Maine, places like that. They're closely related to that, guys. And they are pelagic species, so that means they like deep water and open water. And they prefer to live in waters with up to depths about 150 meters. They normally live far offshore, so that's part of the reason why they're not that well known. And also not that commonly seen, because they are a very open water shark. And they're also one of the very few endothermic sharks, and they seldom are found in waters cooler than 16 degrees. So these guys feed mainly upon cephalopods and bony fish. That includes sawfish, tunas and mackerels, but they also eat other sharks, porpoises, sea turtles, and seabirds, where they usually use lunge feeding, so they go and attack them. Since they're very, very fast, they'll lunge at them and just grab them and attack them. And they usually consume about 3% of their body weight every day, and it takes about 2 days to digest an average size meal. And yeah, you can see with their adaptation, they're very adapted to slippery prey. They've got these very large teeth. Really, really wonderful animal. And they're a very fast species, so they can pretty much just leap out of the water when they're hooked, and that's why they're kind of very common game fish, because they're very fun to obviously fish. And they're a fast species. Well, not I mentioned that. Like other lamnin sharks, they have a heat-exchanger circulatory system that allows the shark to be about 4 to 5.5 degrees or 7 to 10 degrees Fahrenheit warmer than the surrounding water. So it's like some pseudo warm-bloodedness. So they're allowed to, even in cooler water, they're able to maintain their activity because they can maintain that body temperature a little higher. So that's pretty cool and gives them a competitive advantage. So these guys are yolk sac ovoviviparous sharks. So the developing embryos feed on undeveloped eggs that are inside the mother's uterus, and they usually during these 15 to 18 months gestation period. And once they're born, there's usually 4 to 18 surviving young pups that are born in late winter and spring, and reach a length about 70 centimeters or 28 inches. And females may rest for 18 months between birth and mating again, and they bear young average every 3 years, so another slow breeding shark. And they have a lifespan that's been estimated about 20-30 years. Maximum age is estimated to be 32 years in females. And they're actually pretty intelligent for sharks. For all the studied sharks, they have the largest brain-to-body ratio, and the largest brain size prompted New Zealand Sea Life and Craig Thornburn of Auckland, so he's pretty cool. So they investigated the intelligence of the shortfin Mako, and it turns out they are pretty smart, and that's really cool. So they discovered that they were fast-learning sharks and able to determine whether or not the researchers were threatening, so they quickly learned that they were not threatening at all. And they also do not rely on electroreception when hunting, so unlike grey white sharks, they tend to not just attack things that move, so they're a little bit more choosy with what they eat. So you're not as likely to get attacked by these than, let's say, a great white. So they obviously, as I mentioned, they're fish for sport. That's why they're considered anglerfish. And they're one of the fastest species of fish in the water. It's comparable to like swordfish and such. So that makes them fun to catch. And there have been attempts to keep them in captivity, such as SeaWorld San Diego and New Jersey. But they, like great white sharks, they're very pelagic species, so it's very hard to keep them. It's even harder to keep them than great white sharks. And overall, they've been recorded 9 shortfin attacks recorded on humans between 1580 and 2017. Only one was fatal, along with 20 boat attacks. So they are regularly blamed for killing humans because of their speed and power, but they actually are probably one of the least dangerous sharks you'll find in the ocean. It's still a really cool animal. So they are listed as endangered by the IUCN, but have been enlisted from vulnerable to 2019, and they're threatened in 2007. So now they are considered vulnerable, I believe, and they've been a target for both commercial and sport fish. So there's another big issue is bycatch. So luckily they are considered vulnerable, so there's protections there, and obviously reducing bycatch and managing populations is obviously going to be very good for this guy. Wonderful. So now we got another one by Leaf, and that was ported by from Endless Ocean 2. We have got another big fish. So this is the biggest fish of them all. Well, one of them actually. It's not as big as a whale shark, but we have got the giant Oceanic manta ray. So this is a species of ray, and also the largest ray in the world. So they are found in tropical and subtropical waters, also temperate waters from all across the world, and they can get huge. So the giant Oceanic manta ray can grow up to 7 meters wide in disc size. It can be up to 7 meters or 23 feet and can weigh up to 3,000 kilograms or 6,600 pounds. But the average size has been observed to be about 4.5 meters long or wide, or 15 feet, and probably obviously a bit smaller than that. And you can see, they've got this really cool shape to them. They've got like these very flattened bodies with these almost like wings that they can flap about. It's just they didn't get the leaf didn't quite get the flapping around working for the mod, but they'll swim across the water almost like they're flying. That's really, really cool. And they also have these sprintacles that you can see. And you can see these cephalic fins. So cephalic means around the head. So these guys help filter water because they are filter feeders. They feed a lot on plankton and things. That helps guide things into their mouth so they can filter them and eat. So really, really cool. And a big difference between the reef manta ray and the oceanic manta ray is these guys are larger. And that's pretty obvious. These other small things, they can get confusing. So these are the oceanic manta rays. So as I mentioned, found pretty much everywhere. They're found as south as New Zealand and South Africa, but they can be found as far north as Egypt and northern Atlantic. And they're an ocean-going species that live most of their life far from land. They travel on the currents and migrate to find zooplankton and things, and often found in association with offshore islands. So that's pretty cool. There are a few zoos that actually hold them too. There's the Georgia Aquarium, the Okinawa Aquarium also holds these guys, I think. But they're very hard to keep being so big and oceanic. So these guys also, when they're traveling deep water, they swim in a straight line, and these associate with other fips. They can grab into groups of over 50, and they associate with the fish, as well as marine mammals and seabirds. And they usually eat a lot of, since they're filter feeding, they consume large quantities of zooplankton in the form of krill, shrimp, and planktonic crabs. And they can eat up to 13% of their body weight each week, so that's pretty big for a cold-blooded animal. And what's also really, really fun as well is that they maintain themselves by they go to cleaning stations, or they find cleaner wrasse they open themselves up to, and other species of cleaner fish that'll pick off parasites for them. It's a mutual relationship, so they let them swim all over them and eat and all that. So males become sexually mature when they're about 4 meters wide, or 13 feet wide, while the females are about 5 meters wide to breed. And when the female becomes receptive, the males will follow her in a train, and they will grip her and kind of court with her and all that with their claspers and things. I'm not going to give you the birds and the bees on these guys. But these guys kind of lay eggs, so they develop in the female's oviducts, so they're enclosed in an egg case, and the developing embryos are fed on the yolk. Also, they remain in the oviducts, so they lay eggs, but they don't really give birth until they give birth to pups, technically. And they also have this like milky secretion, like a uterine milk they use to feed their babies. And they do not have a placental connection with their mother, but they do rely on the pumping of the water and oxygen through the uterus to give the babies oxygen. And they usually have a gestation period of about 12 to 13 months. Let's have a look at the babies. Well, let's see if there's a baby swimming. Should be a baby swimming. There's a baby. I think the babies are all hanging out on land. Anyway, we'll have a look at the baby. Very, very cute. So gestation period is thought to be about 12 to 13 months, and when fully developed, they can get to 1.4 meters wide in disc width, or about 4 feet 7 inches, and weigh about 90 kilos. Not 90 kilos, 9 kilos and 10 pounds, and resemble the adult. And they usually give birth near the coast, where they remain in shallow water for a few years until they get big enough to hang around. Here's another fun little fact for these guys. They are one of the only fish to pass the mirror test, which is usually associated with intelligence. So like animals like elephants, humans, primates, great apes have passed it. But also manta rays and ants have passed it. So that's pretty interesting. And they also have the largest brain-to-body ratio of pretty much any fish. So they are probably, not what brain size has everything to do with it, but they do seem to be quite intelligent fish. And luckily they're not predator on munch, but they have some natural predators such as tiger sharks, hammerhead sharks, bull sharks, killer whales, and false killer whales. And they are considered endangered by the IUCN because their population has drastically decreased because of fishing. And usually they are not really fished for much. I'm not sure people really eat them, but obviously shark fin soup, things like that. But since they have a low maturity rate, and they usually give birth to only one pup at a time, and late sexual maturity, it's obviously very, very easy to overfish these guys. But luckily, they've actually been fished for their gill rakers. That's what I was thinking, for traditional Chinese medicine. But that's obviously not good. And they luckily are considered endangered, so there are protections, but obviously can get put as bycatch as well. And obviously, no Chinese medicine is good. They're not going to cure cancer or anything, but they are kind of like a delicacy, I believe. Yeah, really, really wonderful mod. And yeah, sadly endangered, but they could be on the road to recovery if we take care of them. So yeah, really, really wonderful. We'll have a little look at these guys as they go. So Leaf, you did a good job. I really love seeing these guys. Even though you didn't get the wings working, I think they still look great. So yeah, I think this would be a perfect place to end the video. So yeah, I really, really, really hope you guys enjoyed this video. I hope you guys like and subscribe. Always remember to hit the little bell icon to get notified when I upload anything. So yeah, hopefully you guys enjoyed this video. Hope you guys like and subscribe. And bye-bye.